Okay, so does everyone remember this little toy from the 70s called Merlin, which was actually a game? It was one of those electronic toys that had 6 games on it, and I had so much fun with it.
I remember playing it in school because it came out in 1978. And there was a bin. It was in a math class, and there was a bin of toys, or I should say, it was a bin of games that we were able to play that were considered logic games. So obviously, chess was in there, and Stratego was in there, and a variety of others. But what drew my attention to Merlin was because it was electronic, and during that era, there weren't too many electronic games, especially handheld games, and this was in the school classroom because there was some learning element out of it. It wasn't purely games.
Well, one thing for me was my older brother had it first. Like a lot of things with me, he had it, and then I begged my parents to give me one, so they finally got one for me. And it's my kind of game, mostly because I was an introvert. I like solitaire games. So this was a game something that I could do by myself and pass the time. And it was just, one of the things I spent a lot of time on back then. It had, 6 games. So there was tic-tac-toe. Oh, Music Machine, which wasn't a game, but you play music. And there was one called Echo, where you follow the pattern that it shows you. It had Blackjack 13, and it had Magic Square, which was one where you have to figure out the patterns and try to hit the right buttons to make a square. And then Mind Bender, where the game, it makes up some kind of pattern, and you have to figure out that pattern. So all of those were great fun.
Yeah, and it was interesting because this is credited as being one of, if not the first, handheld game that didn't have just one dedicated game to it. It had multiple games that you can play. And it was the early stages of these type of games because they were all red lights, and if you played against the computer or another opponent, one person was either a solid red light and the other person, or the computer, was a blinking red light. But guess what? During that time, that was awesome.
This game was really ahead of its time because there was nothing else like it back then. I mean, not when this came out.
And I like the idea that it had 6 games in there because I love the game Simon with the 4 buttons on it.
Yes, I used to have Simon too,
yes,
yeah.
But this one had its own version of Simon built in.
And that was just one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that, and it had the red lights. They were LED lights.
Mm-hmm.
So it had the pattern of lights, and it had sound too.
Oh, the sounds were so
great.
unique. And it was typical of that era to have especially like these bad sounds in there when you did something wrong.
Yeah, you knew when you did something wrong. And also because it had familiar games, I mean, like tic-tac-toe, which we know how to play, so you could play tic-tac-toe against the computer. And so there were the familiar games, and then the other ones like Magic Square, where you had to kind of figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was just something that, like, the precursor to, like, when Windows came out and everybody was playing solitaire.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good analogy because there are certain time frames where everybody played a game because it was so popular and it was so accessible. It was someone, if you didn't have it, someone in your neighborhood had it.
That's right. When I saw the commercial for it on TV, it was on all the time. And what's interesting, I just noticed, so this was actually made by Parker Brothers, who came out with a lot of games and toys back then. And it was actually invented by a NASA employee and his wife and his brother-in-law. So it's like, hey, it was space age.
And the fact that they had that little music machine on it, where it had different buttons for different notes. If you remember, the instruction book came with, if you push the buttons in certain sequence, how to play different songs on it. And I love that. So you could either create your own songs or follow the songs in the instruction books to play a variety of classics, whether it be Ode to Joy or Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Yeah, those kind of songs.
It was a very versatile unit.
Yeah. Well, the sounds were almost like, like a telephone, the old push-button telephones, and each number had its own sound. You could almost say it's like that. But for back then, it was fun. It was just like, oh, you mean I can do this now?
And that being so popular that they ended up re-releasing the games in different ways throughout the years. So even though those recreations of Merlin were never as popular, this game is going to hold a special place in our hearts because of the memories that we had back in the 70s and early 80s.
Yes, because it was the first of its kind, and it was something we spent a lot of time playing with.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our Facebook group. Live long, and may the force be with you. Nanu Nanu.